which in this case mandate behavioural change, and then the hope is this mandated behavioural change will in turn change social norms. So maybe in 50 years' time we won't need quotas in the same way, but it's a part of a dynamic process. And in that respect, the politics of presence is important. So even if all these women in the parliaments are not, the kind of reason to talk about in Pakistan and Rwanda, not enacting legislation that materially improves the position of low-income women, still that politics of presence that changes the face of what does political authority and political representation look like, I think is also important as a way of trying to shift social norms.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. And I probably didn't emphasize enough, although I rushed through the women leaders. I mean, they're still exemplary. They still will influence people. I mean, Hillary Clinton was making this point, wasn't she, in her campaign, about influencing young girls to get involved.
There are two more questions. Yours is first, and then yours.
Thank you so much.
On this side, yes, Amida.
And it is very insightful representation. And I wanted to ask two things. One is that how much this quota linked to gender-based violence and all the equality. For example, and development. In East Timor, East Timor produced the maximum female representatives in Southeast Asia region. Thailand produced the lowest female political representatives in Southeast Asia region. But in terms of development, Thailand is far ahead of East Timor, right? So and also again, gender-based violence, East Timor has higher portion than Thailand. So how do we match, and what are the challenges, and why is that happening? So it's this quota that does not represent this gender equality.
I think you'd have, sorry.
And my second question is the linking to Burma. Burma had, as you know, the lowest female representation until last year. Today, second lowest in the region. And it means that 9 out of 10 parliamentarians are men in the parliament. At the same time, Burmese culturally, women are trained to be shameful, shame and fear and demure. So many MPs that I'm working with often broke down because of an everyday level that the intimidation, demeaning, devaluing, and among the male parliamentarian. Considering also 25% of MPs are military. So everyday level of very intimate, closed, on an everyday level. And as we think that Obama has lifted up from the lowest to second lowest, and under even female representative, it doesn't represent. It doesn't mean that being women leader do not necessarily not necessarily also supporting these women in parliamentarians.
I think that's right. I mean, on taking the second point, I think it's incumbent on all of us. I mean, you're bringing some of these women MPs to Britain, aren't you, to yes. Oxford. So I think that what we need to do is get other women parliamentarians and women generally to be supported so that they can have a network and not feel isolated. I mean, when they do feel intimidated, at least they should have a sense of being pioneers, of doing something special, and hanging in there and having support. I mean, that's just obvious. With regard to East Timor, I mean, that I think that there was a particular struggle for independence, and I think out of the struggle came a huge kind of involvement and participation of women, and that was reflected in the parliament. So the change in society, which you talked about, the cultural changes, will take time. Unfortunately, these things don't change kind of overnight. I mean, the law can change, but we know there's a gap between what a law does and what actually is enforced and happens in practice. But thank you for making these 2 points.
We have 2 more speaker questions.
Take them together?
I hope we can take the 2 together. That is yourself and Hamida. Is there anyone on this side?
I wanted to ask about the relationship between the composition of the body and the quality of political decision making. I mean, in business and commerce, there is increasing evidence that changing the composition, getting a better gender and other type of balance in company boards or in senior management has a positive economic outcome. I just actually literally got a report today that not only in actual doing business, but now the asset managers are taking a position in promoting gender diversity in the companies that they're investing in, and they're doing that for commercial reasons, not for social justice reasons. But my question in relation, well, it could be to lawyers or to surgeons, but more difficult maybe in relation to parliaments, is what kinds of evidence can we build up that diversity has that effect? One of the reasons why it has a good effect at board level in companies is you get a collective decision that is influenced by diverse points of view. I don't know for a surgeon, whether that operates. I mean, a surgeon is doing an operation, and having a diverse group of surgeons may not have the same positive influence. Maybe in judges' decisions handed down, I don't know how that works. In Parliament, I can think of arguments that would be made for how diversity would improve it. I'm asking whether we got any evidence.
Just a second part, can you take Hamida's question? Only because I'm looking at your time. Yeah. Hamida?
No, so I was thinking that, one can't just stop at looking at numbers, but also the whole process of selection and the system in which they work. I mean, in many of our countries, it's sort of dynastic politics, so you're being selected either because of your father, your husband, or whoever. And also that is one restraint. The other one is that what is the system? The system itself is so authoritarian, autocratic, that it encourages the leader, no matter what her own preference may be, to become more authoritarian, which is what we see in the cases of all our women leaders. And third, does it really bring about change unless the women who are in these legislative processes or even in local government, unless they interact with whatever women's group movement is, and depends on how active the women's movement itself is in these areas. Thank you.
Well, just dealing with that one first before Tom, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to highlight, that the process, quotas are incredibly helpful, and they are there, they're part of the toolkit, to use someone else's language. And I think, are here, and I was interesting, Dan, I was going to ask you how long you thought it would be, and you said 50 years before we could step back, and that's probably right. So that's part of the story, but it's not the whole story. And each event, each culture, each country, once you get into it, has a complex story and a hidden backlash. And I personally have written a lot about dynasty and democracy in our part of the world, and I completely share what you said. But then some great women get through, and one has to kind of coalesce around them and work and encourage them and so on. So it's not all depression. Things do change, and even if it's glacial, or suddenly it happens, suddenly you get a step change later when you weren't kind of expecting it, because someone has done the spade work. I think that's important. Composition. I mean, a huge amount of extra work, but it should be done in terms of outcomes and so on. But I think I can leave you with this positive thought, that in the Nordic countries, where you've had high women representation for a long time, 30% for decades, and now 40 and now 45. If one looks at those societies, they are much more inclusive societies. And if you think of Denmark with the high tax, high welfare model, which is the kind of model that several of the other speakers have been encouraging us to think about. I don't think care even in prisons. I mean, I think one of the amazing things about Denmark is their prison system, which is so flexible, responsive, and gender orientated, so that if women are in prison, the access to children and so on is absolutely paramount. I mean, children, and they're not made to feel that they're in a prison. I mean, they change the whole environment, they create a kind of friendly, warm play area, so that mothers and children can be together. I mean, that must be reflective in some sense of the fact that there's, almost 1 in 2 women. I mean, that's what I want to suggest.
Thank you, Paul. I just want to say how interesting this session was and leave 3 dismal statements for you. We've been looking at this whole thing of women in sports for a long time. And the sad part is the numbers don't make a difference. It is usually whether she comes from the women's movement or feminist kind of acculturation. Otherwise, we have so many of these women, for example, in Panchayati Raj. But unless they are sort of oriented and consciousness raised by the women's groups, they just follow the track. So it's interesting that you brought women in parliament, and I'm grateful for that. And aberrations are taking place. Like I noticed there are 14 countries with women as defense ministers. And now we have one in India who's a woman and is our defense minister. She couldn't think at all of the kind of feminist thing of peace, negotiations and so on. She's just a man. So there are all these aberrations of numbers, and thank you so much, Paul, for the discussion. Thank you.